Welcome back. We continue our paper review on Daybreak. We now get straight into bulls and bears, and I can assure you our discussion, Kenya-China trade relations, Kenya-China relations in general, has already begun even while we're on a break. Let's put that question up one more time. Do you think the Kenya-China trade relationship or relationship in general is mutually beneficial? Is China benefiting? Is Kenya benefiting as well? What are your thoughts, whether it's about SGR, traders, imports, exports, you name it? Let us know. 22422 is our SMS line.
Yes, the hashtag is Daybreak. You can call in live as well. 0719 777 0742 961 343. You can tweet at Citizen TV Kenya. Trevor Mbija at Waiga Moura. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We'll sample some of your views during this broadcast.
All right, and of course we'll refer you to page 1 of the Daily Nation. China loan. The Raila about turn, we'll be putting that up on the screen. And the question they're asking is, and we'll pose that to some of our guests here today, is how did one of the harshest critics of President Uhuru Kenyatta's pet railway projects become one of its biggest supporters? And there's a cartoon there of President Uhuru Kenyatta with a begging bowl reaching out to China, ably supported by Honorable Raila Odinga. Nobody thought we would ever see such a cartoon, but it is the reality of our time. And I'll be posing that question to some of my guests here today. But first of all, let me bring in Nyokabi Gachari, who deals with traders on a day-to-day basis. She's a national coordinator of the Importers and Small Traders Association. Nyokabi, let me ask you this. From what you've seen, how has the entry of China into Kenya changed the business for Kenyan traders? What are traders out there telling you about how their business has been affected by, very aggressive Chinese businessmen and businesswomen?
Well, I'll start by saying that we actually appreciate every foreigner that comes in our country.
Okay.
And it's not a bad thing that the Chinese have come in as investors, because we actually, as Kenyans, want them as investors. But on the negative part of it, for the SME, it hasn't been all good. Okay. Why? Because they have infiltrated the SME market, where we actually deal with the retail goods. But now I think the traders feel the government has betrayed them. Has betrayed them? Yes, okay. The government has betrayed them, because there's no what? We actually are asking as SME, how much money should an investor bring in our nation? Because the Chinese now, they've come in as they are the manufacturers, they are the suppliers, they are the retailers, and we are still seeing them hawking.
So they have,
yes.
They've taken the entire chain.
Exactly, yes. And now the people are asking, where is the government? We've been singing left, right, and center, yeah, about the invasion of Chinese. Not in a bad way, but we need it clarified. Who are they? Yes, who are they?
I want you to hang on, because we have a call on the line. We don't want to lose them. Abdullahi from Wajir, good morning. Good morning. Do you have a question or comment about our discussion on Kenya-China trade? Go ahead, Abdullahi.
Jina yangu ni Jibril Abdullahi kutoka Wajir.
Endelea tafadhali.
Ndugu yangu, kuona kwangu hakuna chochote tunafaidika sisi wa Kenya, ila tu wa China wanafaidika wenyewe.
Okay. So hiyo ndio maoni yako?
Kwa nini nimesema hivyo? Naomba niendelee kidogo kama itawezekana.
Kwa ufupi tafadhali.
Sawa. Sasa hakuna bidhaa yoyote kutoka Kenya inaenda China, hata kama iko ni chache sana. Lakini wao wanafaidika kwa sababu wanaleta vitu nyingi sana. Nikimalizia.
Ukimalizia,
hizi madeni nyingi ambayo tunachukua wa Kenya, tunafaa kuandamana na kupinga hiyo.
Unaikataa wewe kama Mkenya?
Naikataa kabisa, kwa sababu nchi ya Somalia iliporomoka kwa sababu ya hiyo madeni. Kwa hivyo ni kama tunataka kuporomoa nchi yetu.
Okay, Abdullahi kutoka Wajir, asante sana, tunashukuru.
And Abdullahi sort of agrees with you, Nyokabi. And you are asking, where is the government? You're saying that you feel betrayed. Honorable, regarding this, I'm sure I have a bill here. It's an amendment bill, that the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Amendment Bill. If you just can show part of it here. And this is one that was brought in by yourself, yeah?
Yes.
But what was it meant to achieve? Because I see You're saying that there's a bit of
pausing
justification. Many foreign companies are taking advantage of the loopholes in law to exploit locals in the supply of goods, services in our market. Yeah? What was this meant to achieve?
Thank you very much. I think this bill was meant to address the concerns of Madam and the people of Kenya, and more so our traders, our contractors, and the local entrepreneurs. We are having what I would call a Chinese invasion in this country. These loans that we are getting are good, and there's no problem at all. Nobody can grow without borrowing. Even yourselves here, you have a small circle here in Citizen, and I know you borrow once in a while. Like we all do. We must borrow to grow. The problem is that we have gone to borrow when we look desperate, and we don't go through the agreements clause by clause. And the agreements are very disadvantageous to our people. And what has happened is that these guys, when they came, they were good. Along the way, they became mischievous. When they were putting the thicker super highway, they gave 30% of the contracts to our local people. Along the way, they became very smart. They came and registered their own companies that are local. So they come and do the entire contract and the subcontracts in quotes by the locals, but it's themselves. What has happened is that when you look at the SGR from Mombasa to Nairobi, 380 billion. They brought in the money, brought all the materials, brought everything, and took away the entire amount. That is why, if you go to the streets today, Kenyans are thinking there is no money. There is no money in circulation. Because all the big money that is coming into the country, all of it is going back to China. And that is why I came up with a bill to address these concerns in this way. One, as it is today, a local farm is that farm that is owned by a Kenyan 51%. So that leaves 49%. So what the Chinese and other foreigners have done, they will come to Zimmerman and pick some local girls and make them some directors in the 49%. So the company is still theirs. So they will do jobs meant for the local people. So the law I've proposed is that a local farm is that farm owned 100% by the people of Kenya. Number two, our people are not able to compete for business with the Chinese. The reason being, the Chinese government has a deliberate policy to look for something to do for their people out there in Africa and elsewhere. So they are giving them loans at 3%. Whereas here we are borrowing at 14%. So when you go for tender, there's no way you can beat them. They are very low. Okay?
They have backing from their government.
They have backing from their government. And then what is happening, like when they get contracts here, you know we have payment problems here because of our exchequer issues and our poverty. Yeah. Then they get money from the Exim Bank in China. They start straight away. Then they raise a certificate. Then they start charging the government interest. And then they end up doing the road more expensively than our people. So what I have done in this bill, I have proposed that all business for supplies and contracts up to 1 billion is capped exclusively for the people of Kenya, local farms only. Are you getting support for this bill? Tremendous. People asking when is it coming to the floor of the House. The law-making process is very slow, but we are almost there. Number two, all business above 1 billion, we do a partnership with the foreigners. Not just the Chinese, all the foreigners. That the local, you do what you call a joint venture, so that the locals can do 30% and the foreigners can do 70%. What that means is that all the jobs that can be done locally will be done by our people. And in the process, there will be technological transfer. So that we start learning these guys slowly. So at another 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we'll be able to do it on our own.
Let me get some quick reactions from my other panelists. But before that, we have some tweets. Let's quickly look at them. And then Dr. Oteli, I'll come to get a quick reaction. Let's put those up on the screen. All right. Feedback coming in. Olum Justice, not beneficial at all. The Chinese government siphons more than enough from this republic annually. We acknowledge their services in the field of architecture, but they have found this country open for outright exploitation. They employ their own in our land. Sad.
All right. We still have more coming through to our newsrooms on Twitter. And Kipto Ruto says it could be, unfortunately, the relationship has been abused by the leadership. The fund sourced from China to support projects has not been accounted for and may not be accounted for.
All right. Let's look at another one here. Engineer Lazaro, Kenya-China relation benefits China more than us. We're offering them ground to create employment for their ever-growing huge population.
All right, I believe we have a last one here before we continue with the conversation. Irina Suwa says, no, we are yet to experience the returns of the first loan. Where is a report showing the investment in the first phase of SGR versus the output? Is there any citizen who's aware of the terms?
I think the president promised Mark Masai
a contract
in December.
But we did not see that.
Maura 24, no relation. How can the Kenya-China relation be beneficial? This is modern colonialism. We seek their loans, give their companies the contracts for the companies, pay them with the loan money they loaned us. They source for raw materials from their own. Then the money heads back to China. Wow.
That's a very important summary there of what's really happening. Francis Kigondu says, if the government followed the views at daybreak, everything would be delayed in Kenya pending consensus SGR, Huduma number, fuel levy, new curriculum, universal healthcare program, 100% transition, etc. stagnating the country.
Okay,
so
that's a nuanced perspective, yeah, and a different one. Wekesa from Kajiado, briefly give us your question or comment this morning.
Wahiga, good morning.
Good morning to you too.
Now, there is what we call dependency. There is what we call dependence theory in development.
Okay.
And this dependence theory states that the developing countries,
yes,
will always depend on already developed countries.
Okay.
There is not at any given moment a developed country will come and depend on a developing country. No. Okay. This is what is happening.
So
Kenya
we are doomed.
is a developing country and it's entirely depending on China. And the benefit mostly goes to China.
Is there any way to overturn that theory, in your view?
In my view,
yes.
As much as actually there's nothing that can be done to overturn the theory of dependence. Why? Because Kenya, we are lagging behind. It is a developing country. The most important thing that as a government we should do is stop corruption. Most of the things that are making our country to lag behind is corruption.
Okay.
If corruption would be reduced to 0%, then the facilities are utilized well, then the country will develop. We shall depend on other countries, but on a minimal percentage. On a minimal percentage.
Thank you so much. That's Wekesa from Kajiado giving us his views. Dr. Otelo, you can now respond to that. Go ahead.
Thanks, Wahiga. Listening to what Mheshimiwa has said, I haven't read the document. I like the justification, but I want to situate the context slightly, stretch it back within which this interaction is happening. When China arrived in Africa, it actually found a huge infrastructural deficit. And deficit was a derivative of African countries' previous interaction with the West, in terms of funding and players, Western players, especially World Bank, had actually perceived infrastructure as risk averse, and they had even, shied away from the sector. So when Chinese came, they found that gap and tried to convince African government that indeed it is possible to fix this infrastructure, and also alongside Western players running away from infrastructure, of course the problem, and another big problem was our local contractors. You'll give them, they'll be given a contract to fix a road. They'll take 5 years to fix a road, a stretch of a road that could be done within even 6 months. That was a big problem. So when Chinese came in, they came with a totally different approach. They came with what the country was, what Africa was looking for at that time. Yes, and the Chinese approach was actually, quick and fast, and that looked so attractive to African countries that were actually in dire need of infrastructural development, and even their mode of delivery. Previously, the African countries and the West, they will, begin negotiations and go on, back and forth, negotiation collapse, and nothing was going on. So when Chinese came, the way they approached the interaction, the negotiation, quite fast. They approached the government, they start doing negotiation, and the following day, Chinese company come, conduct feasibility studies, and they begin the construction. So, and we've seen in that context, we've seen a number of infrastructure projects actually are getting fixed within a very short time. We've seen Mombasa, Nairobi, Thika superhighway, and several other projects.
So you believe they're more efficient?
Yes.
That's the reason why people are heading more towards them?
Yes, their mode of delivery is quite efficient for a country that needs infrastructural development. Then the Chinese model is good for it. Okay. What is now important as far as Mheshimiwa is concerned is now to get a mechanism in which now the local contractors can also be able to interact in that, infrastructural development, maintenance, so that then we can have a meaningful transfer of technology, because we don't want Chinese to stay here forever. We want, as they come, as they fix road, as they do railways, then we can also be able to borrow that technology so that come next 30 to 50 years, we don't keep on bringing Chinese back to the country.
Prof, I'd like to hear your views on this, because this is coming at a time when we're looking at a budget of about 2.8 trillion shillings, which you can't finance, a debt level of 4.8 trillion almost shillings, over 54% of our GDP. IMF says it's way beyond what is recommended. But first of all, how did this happen? I'd like to hear your views on this about TAN, because I had this discussion with you in a different setup where Raila Odinga was very much against this SGR, and now all of a sudden he's the biggest supporter.
I too was against it.
You're not anymore.
Well, still am. I mean, you said he was. I am saying I too was. Okay. I haven't said whether I still am or not. But when I speak, then you see where I am. But before I talk about that, I think let me support what the Mheshimiwa is doing. Okay. But let me also disappoint him by telling him that it will not see light of day. The nature of things in this country is such that what this lady is seeking to get, she will not get. What Mheshimiwa is seeking through law, he will not get. Let's stop there.
I would like to know why you think you wouldn't sail through. Why do you think it would sail
through? It is at the heart of everything. Okay. And it even explains what you're asking me. The Chinese were kind of enclosed. There's an English word which is lost. They kept themselves for quite a number of years. During this time, we thought they were backward, they were communist, they were inward looking. We were wrong. They were looking at the world.
They were strategizing.
And more than that, they were saving money. They have enough money to borrow anybody in this country, in this world. So they were saving, and they were also looking at us. And for Africa, they identified our weakness. And that's why you come in, that's why we all come in, and that's how Raila comes in. They knew you go to Africa, let's talk about Kenya, once you have the leaders in your pocket, you can do anything with the country. And that's why they will continue to do everything.
What do you mean by leaders in their pocket? That's a strong statement.
You know, when Moi came to power, I think you are old enough, Mheshimiwa, to know, he had realized Kenyans are useless people. You give them money and they can't do anything for you. So he just used money and everybody was down, and they ruled us for 24 years. The same thing is what China is doing. They know if you go to Africa, you get the president, you get his people, hangers around him, you know, the nobles around the king. You can do practically anything in those countries. So that's why I'm saying your bill will not see the day of light. You are yours. You continue to suffer. But I have also some good news.
But it's not laughing.
I have also some good news for Kenyans. It will come to an end.
When?
Sooner than anybody can imagine.
Yeah, how?
And I have bad news for China. The Chinese people think once they have the leaders in Africa, then they will ride on our shoulders. They could never be more wrong. They are operating in Africa in a situation where the citizens of those countries are very annoyed with them. They are not happy with them. You are not born perhaps in 1982. Sadly, we had a coup attempt in this country. I think Mheshimiwa, you must have been around.
Yes, of course.
Do you know what happened? It's very sad even to say it on TV. Many people targeted Asians, not because of the property alone, because there was even evidence in social acts like rape. It was inbuilt anger Kenyans had against Asians in this country, which Matiba demonstrated very ably. And the same thing is happening in Africa today and in Kenya. The Chinese think once you have the leaders, then you can do everything you have. You can flood the country with all manner of goods to disappoint this girl and to hurt her with her business people. We know SME contribute about 80% of the whole thing in this country.
Not more.
Yet we are strangling them as if we don't know. What Mheshimiwa is saying is what we would have done from the word go. But because they have our leaders, and that's now how people like Raila now come in, because he's in a political deal. The Raila who said SGR was wrong was a Raila who was speaking from a business perspective. Raila now is speaking as a politician. There's nothing wrong. Politics is out of the possible. I think that's what people teach at the university. Raila now is the politician. And is doing exactly what a politician ought to do. How can you be in this handshake deal as Raila, and then the SGR doesn't get to Kisumu? What will you tell your people? You now must be the politician.
Okay.
If you became president, the SGR will go to Nyeri, to Karatina and the rest. You know, that's what it is. This is politics.
Okay.
But inside him as a businessman, he knows this thing doesn't make sense. And before I stop, let me tell you why it doesn't make sense. This thing is going into 1 trillion shillings. Okay? They are talking of
You're now talking about 1 trillion.
800, but you know there are other many things you have not factored in: land, water, and all the corruption,
land acquisition,
and interest. So it's over 1 trillion shillings. If you had that kind of money as a poor third world country, and you took even half of that money to the frontier districts, Wajir, Garissa, that was Mandela, including even Marsabit, even Turkana, those dry areas, do you know you'll turn them green? Green. It's possible. Gaddafi did it in Libya. With 1 trillion shillings, you can flood water. Garissa, where Douala comes from. Mandera and Wajir. And that part of the country alone can feed this country, can transform our economy. You see what I'm talking about? You're not putting on a rail. That is business. That's economic sense. But we are talking about politics. And we are talking about the Chinese having held our leaders hostage. And now that Raila Odinga is part of that arrangement, the SGR must go to Kisumu, because now that's politics, which is good. The people will clap and they will be happy. You get it?
But taxpayers,
of course, will pay for it.
Will pay for it.
And why I said it will not last is because at this rate, you talk about our national debt. We talk about many things that don't make economic sense. This economy could collapse. Economics, the economy is more cruel than politics. As David Ndii keeps telling us, you can play around with politics. You can't play around with the economics. So sooner than later, 2 things will happen. One, these things will come to an abrupt end because they will not be possible anymore. You get it? If you look at the 2.8 trillion, if you look at how much we collect, if you look at how much we are now using to service our debts, it's
unsustainable.
It's not, it just can't work. So stop. But in another few years from now, when the Chinese think they will now come to take our things because we will not have paid their debts, then they will meet the real owners of this country and of Africa, and they will beat the hell out of them. So I'm advising the Chinese, don't think because you have the leaders.
And I think we need to be careful with some of those statements. I know you've alluded to what happened in 1982. Very sad days.
Yes.
Nobody wants us to go back there. And I'm sure we have Kenyans are not willing to go back there.
I don't even say, I
think what Kenyans now should be asking is of their government.
The point I was making, and we must make it very clear, is that when you are a foreigner and a foreign country and the foreigners operating in a foreign country, you must operate in such a way there is some relationship between you and the people of those countries.
Fair enough, but because it's a national TV station, we'll not allow for profiling of any nationalities, please. So please, make Kenyans voted in their government. They need to ask the government questions, whatever issues they may have with how things are being done.
And I think on that note, we're taking a short break. We'll be back with much more. We'll get in your calls as well, text, tweet. And the question has always been, is the Kenya-China relationship mutually beneficial? That's what we want to know. Hashtag is Daybreak. Back in a moment.